Hi guys, this is Mr. Tan, and today we are looking at the cultural differences for international business. So the learning objectives today is to describe the components of culture and society that affect global marketing, to use Maslow's hierarchy of needs to explain cultural universals, to compare and contrast cultural classification methods, discuss methods for improving cultural understanding and perception, explain the significance of environmental sensitivity to global marketing, and discuss cross-cultural complications as possible solutions. I mean, the purpose of doing and looking at different cultures in different marketplaces is really to understand the needs of customers and to see how this affects the business and more specifically the marketing mix, the product decisions, the pricing decisions, the place decisions, and the promotional decisions. So really, in order to look at the needs of customers, you also have to look at the different cultures, and you need to take this into consideration in terms of your overall marketing strategy. Basic aspects of society and culture. Culture is a way of living. It's a conscious and unconscious values, ideas, attitudes, symbols, shape human behavior. You know, the Americans are very patriotic. They will stand up and sing the allegiance to their flag. In Italy, there's a time when the shops open and then they will close for a period of time in the afternoon, and then they will come back and open up the shops. Different attitudes and values and ways of doing things. Again, and this shapes different cultures in terms of how they behave, and understanding that consumer behavior is very important to understanding the needs and therefore meeting those needs in terms of the different buying situations. So, and culture is learned. It's not innate. Cultural fragmentation occurs when population segments diverge in culture. So when we think about culture, we can think about it as a collective of mental programming of the human mind, which distinguishes one group of people from another. And that's an important point when we talk about programming of the human mind, because again, at the end of the slides, we're going to look at the overall buying decision-making process in terms of the Engel, Collett, and Blackwell model. Um, but in their first model, they had attitudes, beliefs, and intentions, and now the attitude, beliefs, and intentions, is derived from cultural, family, friends, and these influences which shape someone's mind, and someone's mind will shape what they buy, how they buy, and why they want to buy what they buy. And so it's very, very important to understand this. So again, picking up on that key point is the collective mental programming of the human mind, which distinguishes one group of people from another. So you can have people who look similar, but from one country to another, they distinguish themselves in terms of how they think, in terms of how they act, and therefore in terms of how they buy. The search for cultural, universals. Universal equals the mode of behavior existing for all cultures. Universal aspects, is the opportunities to standardize some of the elements of the marketing program. And again, I come back, and in terms of, a domestic orientated international business approach, or a multi-domestic international business approach, or a global international business approach, the question really comes: do you standardize your products or do you adapt your products? And that has implications for your marketing mix. Standardizing or adapting the product, standardizing or adapting the pricing, and likewise the marketing communications and the place. And again, we'll talk about some of the examples in terms of IKEA, in terms of their bed sizes um, you know, in various countries being 220 centimeters, in the UK 200 centimeters, but in China the bed sizes have been adapted to be 180 centimeters. Why? Well, because the space sizes and the flats in China, 1.4 billion people, means that they have to utilize every bit of space And again, they've developed additional products for the Chinese marketplace to take into consideration the outside balcony, because again, price is, at such a premium. So when we think about this, it again comes back down to, affecting the marketing mix, standardization or adaptation. Cultural universals, athletic sports, body adornment, religious rituals, music. Increasing travel and improving communications are leading to convergence. Communication and negotiation. English countries to grow in importance as a language of international level, travel and business. Understanding and speaking the language of a country, is an invaluable asset. So people who grow up in the Western cultures tend to be more verbal, whereas people, who grow up in Eastern cultures tend to be more non-verbal. So, and that is seen even like in the culture of China or Japan. It is more non-verbal in terms of being more verbal in Western cultures. When you give a business card, in the Western culture, normally someone gives you a business card, you take the business card and you put it in your pocket. But in the Chinese culture, if someone gives you a business card, you will notice that they are giving you the business card with two hands. So they're holding two hands with a small business card, and you're supposed to receive it with two hands. Then, after you received it with both your hands, then you look at it, take note, and the reason why you're taking note is to show that you're taking note of the importance of that person. Then you hold it, and then you put it down in view. You don't just put it away in your pocket. So again, non-verbal type cultures in terms of how you act and how you do business in different cultures. Analytical approaches to cultural factors, two approaches. Again, standardized cultural classification, using standardized measures to classify countries. This began in the 1980s. Ethnographic and non-survey approaches, using qualitative techniques to classify countries. So here we're talking about different methods and approaches to classify different countries. So analytical approaches of cultural factors, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We know that with Maslow, he had the psychological needs at the bottom, meeting the food and the water, the safety needs, to people to feel safe and secure, social needs or love and belonging, self-esteem needs, and then at the top, self-actualization needs. And what Maslow was arguing was that in order to meet the higher needs, social esteem and self-actualization, you must first meet the bottom needs, the psychological and the safety needs, before you can move up the pyramid. When we look at the standardized cultural classifications, we have Hofstade's cultural dimensions, which includes the power distance, individualism versus collectivism, masculinity versus femininity, uncertainty avoidance, long-term versus short-term orientation. When we look at Hofstede, Bond, scored each country on a scale of 1 to 100 for each dimension. So here they are trying to analyze the different cultural dimensions in terms of their variables in terms of different countries. And when Hofstede analyzed a database of cultural statistics, he found clear patterns of similarity and differences along the 4 dimensions. And because of his research, focused solely on IBM employees, he could attribute those patterns to national differences and minimize the impact of company culture. Now, you could say it was solely focused on IBM, and is that really a representative sample? But nevertheless, it was still a basis in terms of where to start in terms of this research, in terms of looking at cultural differences and trying to categorize these cultures in terms of different variables. Standardized cultural classifications, Project Globe, builds on Hofstede in terms of explaining cultural effects in organizational structures and processes. 9 cultural, level dimension, particularly overlapping Hofstede. Ethnographic and, other non-survey approaches, used when cultural constructs may differ across societies or change over time. Ethnographic data typically consists of words and images. Value gleaned from ethnographic and other non-survey approaches, proved provides rich portraits of people in their societies. So we're talking about, surveys, or one-to-one interviews, and interviews can be either structured, um, or semi-structured or unstructured. And so conducting these kind of infographic type interviews in terms of to find out really why things are happening. Living, working, and thriving in different cultures, the complexity of identity. Personal identity, includes all the perceptions a person holds about who I am. Social identity includes all the perceptions about a person holds about who we are. I mean, even again, if you look at America and China, and you look at the policies of the Republican parties and Donald Trump in terms of tariff barriers against China and against anti-Chinese rhetoric in the newspapers and on the news and on social media in America. And again, all this combined with American patriotism, leads people to perhaps want to move away from the Chinese type products, and companies that are manufacturing their goods and services in China can have a negative impact on their sales. So again, society, in terms of what the people think in that society and how they act and behave, very important to understand this. Living, working, and thriving in different cultures. The self-reference criterion, SRC. The unconscious reference to one's own cultural values. SRC teaches that a vital skill in the global marketeer is unbiased perception, the ability to see what is so in a culture. Again, please remember, we're talking about culture here, but we're talking about it in reference to understand the different consumers' needs, and therefore their consumer buying behavior, and therefore what should be done in terms of standardization or market adaptation. Environmental sensitivity, the extent to which products must be adapted to culture specific needs of different national markets. Environmental sensitive products require significant adaptation of the environments of various global markets. Environmental insensitive products do not require significant adaptation. So here we're talking about now either adaptation, or standardization. So environmental sensitive products requires adaptation. Again, it has effect on your product. Do you have to now make a different product for that need? Do you need to have different communication of those needs, and so on and so forth? Because if you don't, you're not going to meet the needs of those customers, and your sales won't be maximized. Cross-cultural, complications, high versus low cost context cultures. High context culture, less information is contained in the verbal part of the message. Okay, more information resides in the context of communication, background, associations, basic values of communication. So like Japan, Saudi Arabia. And then low context culture. Messages are explicit. Words carry most of the information in communication. United States, Switzerland, Germany. So again, whether it's a high text culture or a low context culture, we're saying that the communication message, the promotion in the marketing mix of 4Ps, product, price, place, and promotion, and then looking at the promotional mix in terms of advertising, sales promotion, public relations, direct sales, and personal selling. Those messages and how you combine an integrated marketing campaign will differ depending upon a low context culture or a high context culture. High versus low. Lawyers, high context, less important. Low context, very important. A person's word, is his bond or her bond. Low context, get it in writing. Time is everything in high context. Low context, time is money. Negotiations, high context, obviously lengthy. Low context, quick. Competitive bidding, high context, infrequent. Low context, frequently. And then to kind of like to bring all this together, we've touched on these consumer buying behavior before, and the consumer buying behavior, this one is very similar to the Engel, Collett, and Blackwell one, but the only bit missing here is the attitudes, beliefs, and intentions, which would link straight in from the environmental influences in terms of the culture, social class, personal influence, family, and situation analysis, and then the individual differences in terms of consumer related motivation, involvement, knowledge, attribute, personal values, and lifestyle. But the key thing here that we've been talking about is culture in different countries. And this box in terms of the environmental influences, which has the culture and the individual differences, would link into another kind of box which is not in this model, which would be the attitudes, beliefs, and intentions. And that's what we were talking about at the beginning, the attitudes, beliefs, and intentions in terms of the mindset of someone's mind programmed to act and behave in a certain way, and then the attitudes, beliefs, and intentions which lead on to deciding what purchase they will have. So you have typical purchases. A purchase might be a routine purchase, a limited purchase, which is a low involvement item, or an extended type purchase. An extended type purchase, you have two types: a non-compensatory decision rule purchase or a compensatory decision rule purchase. And again, these have different implications. So when we're looking at this, we're saying that looking at that one variable of culture under the environmental influences, it's very important to understand the culture which programs the minds of those people in those societies to act and behave in a certain way, which is going to make them act and behave in terms of their buying decision process when they're buying your products, in terms of do you adapt your products to specific needs, or do you give the same product? So market adaptation, or standardization. Which one do you go for? So take these and bear these things in mind when you're thinking about culture, because they are going to affect all elements of the extended marketing mix, including the product, definitely the price, the place where your retail outlet's going to be. In IKEA, for instance, in the UK, IKEA outlets are placed in retail outlet in industrial outlets, retail parks. But in China, they're placed just near towns. Okay, promotional mix in the message you give, in terms of high context or low context, it's going to definitely influence it. Even the people, the process, and the physical evidence, the extended marketing mix elements. So again, this is very, very important to understand these and understand the marketplace that you're going into, and understand the culture and the mindset of those people in that country. So in summary, culture has both, has both pervasive and changing influence on each national market environment. Global marketeers must recognize the influence of culture. Nations can be classified as a high or low context cultures. And Maslow's hierarchy of needs, Hofstede's typology, and the self reference criterion can provide clues about cultural differences and similarities. Very important, but don't think about these as independent, because they all lead back into the consumer buying behavior model, how people buy, and therefore determining what your marketing strategy is in terms of segmentation, targeting, positioning, and then how you're going to implement the marketing mix. Is it going to be standardized, or is it going to be adapted? So thank you today from Mr. Tan.